So, hi Spiceheads. Thanks for making the time coming in here for a quick 20-minute overview of Windows 10 migrations. I guess a lot of you are looking around for tools or have their own practices on how to migrate over from a Windows 7 to a Windows 10. A lot of you have probably done Inplace upgrades by now. So I want to talk a little bit about I'm with Barramundi Software. We have an automation tool that will help you with all of these problems, like with all of the automation that's needed around building a new operating system, automatically deploying it, mass deploying them, make sure that all your settings are retained. So I want to talk a little bit about the different methods that are currently used in the market to migrate over from one operating system to the other, and a little bit about the pros and cons on which approach to choose. So the most common approaches are the following. The rip and replace during hardware exchange. So that's one way to do it. Every time a machine gets too old, you just replace it, and that typically gives you a 4-year cycle, which kind of gives you a little problem right there, because now with the Inplace upgrade need to recycle or rebuild machines within a year, you don't want to rip and replace constantly. You just can't do that. The next one is the Windows 10 imaging. So just push out a new image to the machine. That is a quick way of getting a new OS out there. Problem with that is, like, in what company does every machine really look the same? Where don't you have different departments with different software needs? So imaging is a start, but it doesn't get you all the way there. The next one is the Windows 7 in-place migration or Windows 10 in-place migration. You can do those. The problem with that could be, and I'll get to that, the in-place migrations are necessary, but it's pretty much side-loading an OS, having the right disk space available. There's some challenges with that I get to a little bit later. And then you have the unattended OS installation and the automatic software deployment, and that's the last version, which is typically the most comprehensive way of doing migrations, and I'll talk about that and what the value is of having that. So rip and replace. If you don't want to have a storage locker looking like that, then rip and replace might not be the right way to do it. Again, the biggest issue with rip and replace is the cycle is too long. You can't replace a machine all the time. It's also a huge waste. If you look at the system requirements for Windows 10, compare that with the system requirements for Windows 7, they were identical. So you really, most of your machines should still be able to handle Windows 10 fine. I'm not saying never replace a machine, but not at that rate. So the pros are, there's a low initial effort. The drivers are fully integrated because you get them loaded by the manufacturer. But the big cons are every machine will look different. You know, the images from the manufacturers change. That you get, you still have a lot of additional effort of getting your software installed. You still have to maintain those machines. Your corporate security standard have to be implemented. So there's so much work on top of it that I don't think it's a valid approach. The imaging is probably the most common way people do their migrations in the US, at least. And the reason for it is the deployment speed. With some effort, you can get most hardware somehow cloned and get the drivers in there nowadays. You have consistency in between the machines of one image badge. And that's actually where there's already like a little bit of a problem. You have common software and custom configurations can easily be put into the image, and it's relatively inexpensive. But where the big problems come is that an image is outdated the moment you put it out there. It doesn't have the latest patches that come out from Microsoft. It doesn't have the latest software on it. A month from now, you would have people call into support and say like, oh, I have an issue with my machine. And then the first question should actually be, okay, what image was loaded? When was your machine last rebuilt? Because you want to know what the baseline is you're even dealing with. You don't have that consistency across the board. And there's other things that imaging is typically something, we do support imaging as well, but imaging is something that we recommend for extremely consistent environments. So if you have classrooms and they all need to look exactly the same, imaging is great and it's worth building that image. But how many times do you update those? How much effort do you spend and disk space do you spend to keep all of these different images on your network? Okay, and then The in-place migration. That's a way to get away from Windows 10 really quick and do an in-place migration to Windows 10. Now you have like old stuff still sitting there. You have old DLLs still on the machine. So there's plenty of issues that are built into that migration approach. While we will see that more and more now, Microsoft kind of forces us that route with the Windows 10 in-place migrations. But you always have like these leftovers from the previous OS. You have DLLs sitting there that might be exposable or insecure that are sitting on the machine and just left there. In-place migrations can get you off Windows 7 quickly, but over time this is not a good strategy for a consistent environment because you're not ending up with something like where all the machines are looking the same. And that should always be your approach. If you do a new migration strategy, your approach should be that all of your machines should have the same software on it, should be patched up to the same level, and should have the same operating system. And when Microsoft brings out a new operating system now, and I'm saying new operating system like on purpose, like every Windows 10 is a flippin' new operating system. So, and you have 1 year to get off your old one to get to the new one. I've talked to many people here and they say like, oh, we don't have any Windows 7s left or just a handful. And then I asked them like, how many Windows 10 from 2016 or 2015 do you still have out there? They're no longer supported. They already past due on being patched by Microsoft. So you would have to keep up the cycle now all the time. You have 1 year to get off that latest Windows 10. And that's where you need tools to help you with that, because otherwise you're going to do nothing but imaging, and have no time for anything else. So that's where a proper OS installation and configuration management comes into play. So it's the cleanest way of doing it. You can send out a new OS while that machine is still sitting at the user's desk. You don't even have to go there. Because the way these systems are built, and our system is built, is you can actually say like, oh, before you go to lunch, just reboot your machine. It's all set up by a Pixie. The machine will boot up. It will take the user data off. It will then install the new OS or do an in-place migration. Make sure that during that in-place migration, your settings don't get changed. No additional apps get installed. You don't have like Xbox spec on that machine and stuff like that. And then when it's done, it sees like, oh, this is a machine for marketing, so it needs our standard build, our standard configuration, and layered on top, it will need all the marketing applications. That's the way to do it. And once you have a system like that in place, a migration is peanuts. You just say like, okay, I've got a new OS. I point my tool against the source files. I say use the same configuration template as last time around with the same apps and features and backgrounds and corporate design. And you just start rolling them out piece by piece. You create jobs, send them out, tell people when they happen. Don't push out updates while people are working. So, we have tools in there that give people a chance of postponing it, give you a few weeks of lead time until you then have that deadline. If they don't do it by then you force them, obviously, because you need to get that back to that consistency. Packaging is a big con on this side. Usually, there's several tools that do this, but the big pain point is I need to package up all my applications that go on top of my OS, and we actually automated that process for you. So rather than leaving you to your own devices of writing PowerShell scripts and VB scripts and looking up like command line switches on IT Ninja or whatever, we actually guide you through that process. So there's no scripting involved there. If you don't know how to write a PowerShell script, you typically will never need it. I've been doing this for 25 years. I've done implementations and upgrades at companies the size of large banks. And to this day, I don't know how to write a VB script. I don't know whether that's good or bad, but I don't. And I still got the job done. So it's all about having a tool that helps you with the automation. Because that's where you're going to spend. If you have a good tool like this, and you have full control over your environment, and they're all consistent, that's where you're going to spend the time, and you look forward and say, like, oh, what's coming next? What's the next update that I need to take care of? But now you have the time to take care of it because the actual installation, deployment, all that tiny bitty task that you have to then do day in and day out is gone. So this is an example of what an OS install sequence can look like, that you can send out as one job with our tool. So you say like, perform a personal backup first, wipe the hard disk clean, and you have different DoD wipes and everything included. Then deploy the operating system, Windows 10 64-bit, and you can obviously then switch that out for a different version of it. Then you distribute the standard software bundle that everyone gets within the corporation. On top of that, you do the accounting bundle or whatever role-based bundle is necessary. At the end of that, you do the deploy Microsoft patches, make sure that you get this machine that was just built patched up to the latest and greatest. Then you run our third-party patch management over the top so that all the third-party software that was included in that particular bundle also gets updated. And we're talking about the browsers, and so on and so on. And then you just restore the personal data for that particular machine, stuff that they may have stored in a local drive or some Word documents and stuff. Yeah, take an inventory and you're done. So that machine then comes back online within, typically, depending on how much software you have, less than an hour, that machine is completely built. So that's something that you can do during a lunch break. And again, you as an admin only say, push this job out to that machine. It takes you a minute, and that's all you have to prep for it. Quick to the software automation that I was talking about. Deployment of different software types. Everyone knows how to do MSIs. I would say about 50, 60, maybe even 65% of all the software that you find out there nowadays is an MSI. So, and every software vendor in this market space knows how to automate MSIs, and you all know how to do it either. But then we have the additional setup engines. That's where I would guess at least 50% of you spend time on IT Ninja and other websites, try to find out what are the command line switches, who has done it already. Then you get, I always love when you get 5 different approaches on how to do it and 5 different switches and only one of them works. So you have to test them all. Awesome. What we do there is actually you point us at the executable, we analyze the executable for you and say like, hey, this is an inno setup. Do you want us to build an answer file for you? Yes. Okay, here's the answer file. You just click through the setup, and within 2 minutes, you have a setup ready to be deployed. If it's a Wise installer or an install shield, we do the same thing. So we pretty much identify known setup types and then guide you through that process. If it's something that we don't know and nobody knows and it's just something proprietary, what we can do, we can actually start the installation sequence and record the interaction with the setup and then deploy it that way without you having to know how to automate it, because oftentimes there are no switches for those applications. So we're trying to bring really the typical effort down to the absolute bare minimum by giving you a tool that was made for admins. It's not made for developers. If you're an admin, you have a clever mind and a good admin skill set, you can actually get everything done with the software. So conclusion on what to look for a tool that actually gives you an easy setup installation and customization, that gives you the proper tools to do that. It needs to be ready for rapid release and not just being able to deploy a new OS. You need to be ready for that 1-year cycle that you're facing now. On the software configuration deployment, that's where you're going to spend most of your time. Where whoever has an automation system, that's where you spend your time. Make sure that you have something that supports you in the packaging itself. You want to have configuration adjustments, so you need tools that can also reach very deep into your operating system. Stop services, disable services, change registry keys, do all of these things without coding. And then patch management. Look for something that patches your system beyond just WSUS. How often did I hear, even this week again, what do you do for patching? Oh, we use WSUS. That gives you a little bit of Microsoft patches. What with all the other software on your machine? What's with all your browsers, all your Adobe products, all your Apple products, all your runtimes and such? Those are the most vulnerable things, or the things that make you most vulnerable if they are outdated. So you need something that does that as well. So, and then, unfortunately, and who is aware, or who was aware here, that Windows 10 from 2017 is no longer supported by Microsoft? That's actually more than I expected, because I talked to a lot of people that came up to our booth, and when I told them, like, you know what, you really need to get rid of them before you even get rid of your Windows 7, because that at least is still supported till January, they were like, oh, I didn't know that. So, After the migration is before the migration. Use something that can support that rapid release, that quick cycling of operating systems now. It is the new reality, and we need tools that actually support this. And I see a lot of companies or a lot of people walking around looking for all kinds of security tools that can sniff their network. And you have all these different security tools out there right now, but they don't have the baseline down. They don't have their machines patched up. They don't have the current software on their machines. That's what you have to accomplish first. After that, sure, it makes sense to have something sniff your network for intruders, but that's not your biggest threat right now. So that's actually a little bit about that service branch, and we're pretty much all on that semi-annual channel now, where we have like 2 releases a year, and the second release actually gets you to a point where you have to replace the one from the year before. So 12 months, roughly, is about the time you have to do this. Here's just a quick picture of our customization tool, and you see, like, for instance, the apps on here, and you see like there's stuff in there that really no one wants to have deployed. And if you just use a regular Inplace upgrade from Microsoft and let that run, what always happens is while it takes over the user settings and the user profile, the actual setup of the OS is always the default, back to Microsoft default. So all the apps that you have like nicely taken out of the initial installation of that operating system, where you say like, I don't want the Xbox, I don't want Cortana, I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't want them to have the Windows Store. All that stuff gets, with the next Inplace upgrades, automatically installed. And now you try to feather that out of the machine. So we build a tool like this that you can just do the selections and then save that as a template. When the new OS comes out, you just take that and select, roll out this with the same template again, and then you don't have to do any extra legwork there. Maybe for like new features that came into or that were just newly released because we didn't know that when we had the template, but you can actually apply the template first and then just make the custom changes for that are new in terms of new features and new apps. Any questions? We have someone with a microphone, yeah.
Does the setup still work with like retail versions of Microsoft Office as long as you have the key code or something like that to bring it from Windows 7 into a Windows 10 environment?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, like
Can it be automated?
It can all be automated, yeah.
How does your software interact with computers that are encrypted with multiple users logging into it?
We can actually manage encryption for you as well. We can activate or deactivate. We can run scripts before we even, like, we're on the BIOS level. Like when you boot into Windows PE, we have access to the hard drive. We can even install the encryption product for you and activate it. And with multiple users, you will have to have an admin user that can log into the machine so that we can deploy. So our admin that we use to, do the installations on the machine will have to have rights to that machine. But when the other user then logs in after the fact, we only bring down what's necessary for that particular user, and the software is already there. So that wouldn't be an issue. We actually work with different encryption vendors on solving these kinds of obstacles. Just one more. I don't know, how much time do we have left? 2 minutes? Okay.
I have
time for...
Is it on? Okay. I had a question about the fall creator, like spring creator. Can you throttle the speed on how, like when you're doing up? Can you hear me?
Yeah, very hard. Let me just get closer to the speaker here.
Can you throttle the how fast or like the network on your updates? Like we got some locations that use hotspots, things like that just when those creator updates hit, they slow down the network really bad. Can you throttle?
Yeah, what we can do is actually we have a system that's job-based, so we can actually stagger the jobs further so they don't go at the same time. You don't try to push out like 20 new Windows 10s at the same time on a network like that, so you would stagger them longer. You also have the option to just put like repositories or just a simple NAS box or so on that network, and so like use something local. Don't try to go back to the headquarters and pull it from there, because that never works. can then use the same thing for all the software, all the patches, everything can be then from the mass data can be loaded from that local repository rather than the central. The only thing like for the control of what that machine needs, that traffic runs across your WAN link, but no mass data. Make sense? Okay, unfortunately we're running out of time, but if you have any questions, you probably saw us in our lederhosen out there anyway, so you know where we are right over there. Come to the Barramundi booth and take a look. We're happy to talk to you, talk to your individual problems with the updates or with the management of your endpoints. We not only manage Windows, we also manage like Android, iOS, and Mac OS. So it's a unified endpoint management, so you can get all of your devices into one console and keep total control of their life cycle. So just check us out. It's a very innovative software that we're offering here. We were here last year, and a lot of Spice Hits actually took us up on the offer. All right, thank you so much.